Morning, everybody.
Welcome to what I think is the last fireside chat of the ARPA-E conference. Hopefully you all still have energy from the last few days. I'm Aliya Haq. I'm the Vice President for U.S. Policy and Advocacy at Breakthrough Energy. I'm thrilled to be talking with John Podesta, Senior Advisor to the President for Clean Energy Innovation and Implementation, right? Okay.
This is the innovation part.
Yes, yeah. Well, so I have, John, you know this. I mean, I've been working in the climate space for a couple of decades, and I will say most of those decades have been dark at times. It's been in the policy space for climate. It has been sometimes frustrating. Sometimes it's like staring into the abyss. But in the last few months, I've been feeling a lot more hopeful, a lot more optimistic, and that's mainly because of the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act. So given your role at the White House, I'm really excited to get your take on how the IRA is going, and I'm really interested in how all the laws work together, both with the bipartisan infrastructure law and the CHIPS Act. How can that support and accelerate deployment of early stage technology? Well, so first I want to say, I mean, you've seen it all. You've been in and out of government for quite some time, much longer than my 2 decades. What compelled you to go back into the White House?
Well, I have clearly failed at retirement. So Aliya and I worked together quite a bit in advance of passage of the Inflation Reduction Act, both going back to 2019 and 2020 to try to shape what the strategy could be for a new administration that was trying to power an economy with investment, innovation, job creation, business development around the clean energy space. And then, of course, we worked together very hard during the perils of Pauline journey for the law that used to be called Build Back Better and then was kind of narrowed and looked like it died 1,000 deaths. But some of us maybe lost heart, but some of us didn't. And this pushed through the largest investment in clean energy, the largest investment to tackle climate change, not just in U.S. history, 10 times bigger than anything that passed before, but really in global history. So this is a landmark law that can change the way, and it attacked every sector of emissions, power, which there had been a lot of time and effort spent on Capitol Hill, but also transportation, buildings, manufacturing, agriculture, forestry. So it's a huge and sweeping investment by the United States to once again take the lead to address the climate challenge and do it through a strategy, as I said, of that's government enabled, but really private sector led, because so much of the work is being done by supporting entrepreneurship, business development, investment that will create, I think, a virtuous cycle of innovation. That's why I have innovation in my title. Again, the people here at this conference, I was sort of around at the creation of ARPA-E too.
You have seen it all.
Are really a hugely important part of that structure, that ecosystem to improve performance, again, across all those sectors that cause emissions to the atmosphere. And then I'll just close with this, which is that this bill, I think, gives the tools to the president to meet the very ambitious climate goals of 50% reduction, 50 to 52% reduction of emissions for the United States based on 2005 by 2030, on our way to a 100% clean power sector by 2035. We're going to need the innovation of the people in this room for that. And then ultimately, what is really an amazing and audacious goal, but one that I think is achievable, which is a net zero economy by mid-century.
Yeah. I will say this, that last year, there are 2 moments I really remember. One was when we got news that Senators Manchin and Schumer had come to an agreement to get this bill through. And then the other was a Friday midday press release that announced that you're going back into the White House. Because we were truly thrilled that you're willing to do that and make sure that this law really takes effect. What do you think made it possible, given the many years, many runs at trying to move clean energy and climate? Why was this one actually possible to get through? How did we get Senator Manchin going from shooting a climate bill in a campaign ad to voting for this?
Well, look, I think fundamentally, if I go back to Waxman-Markey and the efforts to create an economy-wide cap-and-trade system, we fundamentally did something that I think was absolutely critical, which was we stopped asking the question, what do we need to shut down? And we started asking the question, what do we need to build? And America can build things, although there are challenges to that. We'll probably get into a little bit of that. And there, when we took a little bit of a lapse from leadership on the clean energy and climate effort, but now we're back. And the fact that the U.S. Is moving to say that it really is through that support for these low emission, no emission, clean energy technologies that are cheaper, better, produce public health benefits, will be drivers of economic growth in this country, of job creation. That changed the political story. And I think one of the things that was interesting, I think, and you mentioned Senator Manchin, but as this bill was going through, and it went through on reconciliation, which is sort of inherently a more or less partisan process. And the reason for that was, I think, multifold, but largely because I think, at least at that point, notwithstanding what Republican voters think, the Republican establishment in the Congress was not interested in partnering with the president on this. But it went through on reconciliation. But the one thing that kind of united the more, blue dog and center Democrats with the more progressive side was the provisions to invest in clean energy.
Right.
They were all in on that. And I think that Senator Manchin comes from, a state that has been traditionally, its whole economy was grounded in fossil fuel production and power development. And I think he knew that the transition needed to happen. I think he understood the challenge that climate change posed overall to the economy and the well-being of the American people, and took a lot of effort, a lot of work, a lot of frustration.
Yeah. A lot of emotions,
a
lot of feelings.
A few nasty comments by me that that he's
that may have been in the press, maybe not in the press.
He's forgiven me for, I think, maybe, sort of. But finally came around, and so we had every Democrat voting for this bill in both the House and Senate. But what I think is really important is that the bill got over the finish line, and we need to make good on that vision of an investment-led strategy that will reach all parts of the U.S. The other critical feature of this bill and fundamental to the president's embrace of it was tackling environmental justice, making sure the jobs in the clean energy sector were going to be good jobs. So there are features of the law, as you well know, that direct investment to places that have often borne the brunt of both industrial and fossil pollution and power sector pollution, as well as paying prevailing wage using certified apprenticeships. So the whole package, I think, was both extremely popular on the Hill and is extremely popular with the American public.
Yeah.
And that's across the political spectrum.
It's really groundbreaking when you think about how historic this is. I mean, I really think about, I have 2 young kids, and I think about the essays they're going to be writing in their history classes about comparing FDR's New Deal to this package of bills. What this could do to the American landscape and the economy is just incredible, how it'll change the path. So a lot of folks think about the IRA and some of these statutes, including bipartisan infrastructure law and CHIPS and Science is more R&D, but a lot of folks think about it more about deploying mature technologies and working for wind and solar and pieces that are already getting cost competitive. But it does a lot more than that. It funds across the entire innovation landscape from R&D to demonstration to that deployment piece. And I'm wondering how are you seeing some of those provisions in the three laws, IRA, bill, and CHIPS?
Yeah, I'm glad, Aliya, that you raised that there's this package of statutes that really, I think, are going to shape the economy. And they're all related to the energy sector, by the way. So the first that passed was the bipartisan infrastructure law, which laid the foundation for deployment of EV charging around the country, had money on the innovation front to invest in green hydrogen through the $8 billion in the Hydrogen Hub program. It was had money that provided the capacity to help in demonstration of new technologies to decarbonize the industrial sector. So that was the first bill that passed. The CHIPS and Science Act is another amazing bill dealing with, we can get into this on the IRA side too, our overdependence of foreign supply in the CHIPS world, so to really supercharge once again the U.S. leadership, not just in chip design, but in production here. And of course, that's fundamental to the clean energy space. I think people forget how much information technology is going to be a leader in both things like grid management, like the applicability, the ability to take advantage of these clean, from the built space to every aspect of the clean energy technologies. Chips are fundamental. And then, of course, the IRA. First money that went out the door was $1.5 billion to the national labs. I went out with Secretary Granholm to our Argonne National Laboratory, just shortly after the IRA was passed, to begin to deploy that money, and both on supercomputing, and Argonne has a very mature program on trying to develop new battery chemistries so that we have, chemistries that are earth abundant rather than rare earth, right. Which will, I think, both from a security and an economic perspective, are really critical. Right. The demonstration money that's in the IRA will be very significant in terms of, but it's speed and scale. That's really what's underneath the overall strategy, and that starts at the technology development level. The president's 24 budget supports that, but we have to go faster, and we have to get to deployment, and we have to overcome some obstacles, including permitting, interconnect. I mean, there's a lot. I sometimes describe my job as having a putty knife, and I'm scraping gum off the sidewalk. There's just a lot of challenges on deployment, but I think working together with a great cabinet, we can overcome those.
What's a better way to spend your retirement than with that putty knife on that sidewalk? That's what I dream about too. Well, speaking of the grid, a lot of the new technologies we're going to need to achieve net zero emissions are going to require clean electricity as an input. That obviously includes electrifying transportation, electrifying buildings, but also a lot of early stage technologies that are going to look to scale up in the next 20 years, 30 years are going to need clean electricity. So as you mentioned, I mean, a huge challenge is how do we connect new renewable projects to the grid? How do we get that clean power where it needs to be? What are you seeing the administration working on these days?
Well, look, I answer that in two parts. There was a couple of new studies. The National Renewable Electricity Lab in Boulder, the national lab devoted to renewable electricity, just did a study last week, said that as a result of the passage of the IRA, the power sector could be 84% clean by 2030. Jesse Jenkins did an update of his study at Princeton, basically said that you'll only get 25% of the benefit unless you solve these transmission and interconnection problems. So both things are true, I think, actually. I think we're seeing both. There's a new announcement this morning on, very substantial announcement on electric vehicle batteries by LG in Arizona. We've had almost $100 billion of investment in that sector. We're seeing more and more. I was on a panel yesterday with the Senior Vice President for Hanwha Q-Cells in New York. More and more investment in the solar supply chain, bringing that back to the United States to build it. But it's not going to work unless we get the grid fixed. We get high performance transmission built, high voltage transmission built. We need to increase that by 60% between now and 2030. We need to double the speed in which we're permitting transmission. So that is a very top of the mind problem for me, but for the whole cabinet. The president has directed to do everything we can to use the authorities we have. We have some authorities that have really never been used in the Federal Power Act that give the Secretary of Energy significant authority to break through log jams, which we're going to do. And we've organized our cabinet to both invest in America and tackle these permitting problems sector by sector, really. Onshore wind, offshore wind, mining, etc.
That's great.
CCS, Class 6 wells, the whole 9 yards. We have to stay on top of this. And I just close with this, which is, as you've noted, I've kind of been around the track a little bit, worked in 3 White Houses, worked in 4 administrations. I think that this has never been a priority at the most senior level of government. Our president has demanded of his cabinet that it become a priority. And we're organizing under our new chief of staff at the White House leadership and his deputy, under Mitch Landrieu, works on the bipartisan infrastructure law, Secretary Raimondo, everyone, Secretary Granholm, they're seized with this. We're working it, and we're working it literally at the project-by-project level.
Yeah, that's great to hear. And I know, I live on the outside of the government, and I can say in my time, very few people would focus on transmission in advocacy groups and philanthropy and the universe that lives trying to get policy. And a lot of this is policy fixes, so you need to have everyone working together. And in 2019, Bill Gates, who I work for, got really excited about transmission, realizing how hard this problem was and how crucial it was. And talking to some of the transmission experts in the space, they would say, oh, great, there's only 7 people that care about this in the country. Now Bill Gates is one of them. And it's just nice to see that exponentially increase with each year.
Yeah, and interconnection is a little bit of a different problem with different inputs. We need better planning. We need more, cross-ISO transmission ability to move electrons across regions. But we're working on that too. We could use some help from the Hill on a bipartisan basis. The House is sort of starting off on what they're calling a permitting bill. It's largely doesn't resolve any of the problems that clean energy has, and it's mostly just a giveaway to traditional legacy industries. Yeah. And so that's disappointing, but I think there's bipartisan interest in developing a more down-the-middle bill. And if I could just, it's going to require some new thinking by the advocacy world, particularly in the environmental space. I mean, if you look at the IPCC report that came out and think about what the world's going to be like in 30 years, then you're going to have to kind of change your attitude and understand that if we can't build clean, then all of the other environmental benefits of clean air, clean water, conservation, species preservation, etc., are all out the window because climate change will swamp all that.
Right.
So that's maybe sometimes unpopular to say to some of my friends in the environmental community, but really there needs to be new thinking there too, because we're overly litigious. We have learned how to stop things more than build things, and we have to have a sort of change of attitude. We have it in the administration. I think it has to be broader across the landscape.
It's a real reckoning, I think, and a pivot moment for a lot of those interests. So, another thing I wanted to ask you about before our time, the financial landscape right now for startups in particular is a little rocky, I think, especially in the wake of SVB, but even before that. Understanding that that challenging ecosystem for startups, what's your message to these folks about how they should think about taking risks right now in the clean energy space? And how does the federal clean energy funding in these 3 laws help mitigate some of that risk?
Yeah. Well, look, I think that's a very central question right now. I think SVB was a big lender in the clean energy space. I think it was 6th largest in the country. I think I commend our Secretary Yellen and Leo Brainerd, who's our came from the Fed as our new national economic advisor, for trying to provide some stability, along with the other regulators in the system. I think that their commitment to try to protect depositors was important. But I think things are going to be a little bit. There's no question. There's going to be a turn here.
Some turbulence.
Hopefully
Put on your seatbelt.
for a short time. And as this settles out, that seems to be happening. But that is essentially on the lending side. But I think there's no better time to invest in clean energy than under a bill that gives 10 years of certainty on investment tax credits, production tax credits, not only in like I said, in the traditional power sector, but in these new technologies around green hydrogen, CCS, direct air capture, there is, if there was ever a time to lean in, it is now. We just don't have the time to go slow.
Right.
We have to accelerate this transition. The climate is telling us that. We see it every day with extreme weather in our country and around the world. We have to go faster to transition our energy system. We have to do it wisely so that we're protecting the economy and protecting people's pocketbooks. But in the end of the day, this is going to lower costs for consumers. So there's like 100 reasons to do it. But and the United States now has a structure that, as I said, is government enabled. So there's never been a better time to deploy capital in the clean energy space than right now. And you could think big, because I think, people ask me, well, there's a new house. Is it stable? Is it rooted? I think when you see these announcements being made, jobs being created, projects being built, we have other challenges, workforce challenges, et cetera. This is a rooted bill, and there's no going back. We will both protect it, but I think the American people will protect us. They want this transition to happen.
And how the federal agencies that are developing the programs, DOE, Treasury, USDA, EPA, how should early stage companies think about engaging with the federal government as these programs get designed, especially given how much it could affect the risk and the pace for these?
Our office, one of our principal responsibilities, coordinating the whole of government, the executive office of the president, but everybody, to try to get the guidance right. I think one of the most important aspects of making this program work is to have clear guidance from the Treasury on how these, particularly these tax provisions, are going to work, so people can make smart decisions, finance projects, invest in projects with the certainty that the support that's coming from these projects is there. But we've tried to have a very open process. I think right from the get-go, there was a request for information. The overburdened staff at the Office of Tax Policy has an open door policy. We do in the White House. If people have ideas about how to shape this, I think we want to hear from you. And the one thing I would say is the other interesting and important feature of this law is that it envisioned trying to make change happen across the country in every community, including in communities who are in transition from traditional fossil fuels into the new energy economy. So you get a bonus for paying prevailing wage, as I noted, for investing in energy communities, for investing in disadvantaged communities, deploying in low-income communities. So I think for people who are developing business plans, they ought to be take that into account and be thinking about that, because the additional incentive to go to places that have often been left out and left behind are pretty strong in this statute. There's also the ability there's a substantial number of grant programs and lending programs. I didn't mention the DOE LPO, the Loan Program Office, which I think for the more mature startups, begin to look at be able to borrow as those companies are transitioning to production. That's certainly a benefit with $350 billion worth of capacity for loan activity. Yeah. The Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, the Green Bank that EPA is standing up, is another place that could be attractive and valuable. But I think we're like open door. I think we've been pretty good about actually listening and trying to learn from the marketplace. We don't know everything. We admit that. And we can't keep track of everything, actually, of it.
It's a lot.
In essence, what's going on there. We're dependent on the private sector to help us understand what the impediments are, what the breaks in the system are, so that we can help resolve those.
Yeah. Well, John Podesta, thank you so much. I appreciate the time. And I think we're down to the next agenda.
All right.
Great. Thanks.
Thanks, Aliya.